Him. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Distinguished guests, respected professors, and dear colleagues, on behalf of Islamic Institute of uh, ISTAC-IIUM and the organizing committee, I warmly welcome you all to session 2 of our series Readings from Ibn Khaldun, the Muqaddimah. We are truly honored today to have with us Prof. Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican, a leading scholar in history, social thought, and civilizational studies. His work has profoundly contributed to our understanding of historical narratives and decolonization of knowledge, which directly resonates with the spirit of Ibn Khaldun's intellectual legacy. In this session, we will continue our exploration of the Muqaddimah, focusing on Ibn Khaldun's critical insights into society, culture, politics, and the rise and fall of civilization. This work remains one of the most original contribution to social sciences and historiography, and its relevance endures as we confront contemporary intellectual and civilizational challenges. Our speaker, Prof. Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Mericans, a renowned historian and media scholar. His research and writing span history, social theory, media studies, and Malay civilization. His engagement with critical theory and Islamic intellectual heritage makes him especially suited to guide us through this important text. The presentation will be take approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and this will be followed by the question and answer session and open discussion. So with further delay, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican.
Thank you, Brother Faiz. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To friends and colleagues and students, thank you for attending this session, which is the second, which is convened for the major objective of exposing the one of the greatest works of our time, the Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. Now, today I'm going to start with some preliminary remarks and perhaps continue those remarks which I made in the last lecture. And then second, to share with you his life, the biography of Ibn Khaldun, because based on last week, on the last lecture, I discovered that to know the Muqaddimah, one needs to know the writer. I would do an injustice to the Muqaddimah by decontextualizing it and delinking it with the life and times of Ibn Khaldun, because it is situated, it is located, it was brought up, it was maneuvered within the context of North Africa and Europe at the time. I think we have to bear in mind that many of the works of Ibn Khaldun have not mentioned Europe. I myself discovered that Ibn Khaldun referred to Europe, and Ibn Khaldun had lived in Europe, particularly basically in Spain. And this is important to see how that has nurtured the Muqaddimah. And after giving a brief picture of his background, I will go to his text. The idea of this session is to read from the Muqaddimah. It is a reading session. It is a session where like-minded people, and I'm one of them. I'm one of you all. To read the Muqaddimah, and in his own words, I would not interpret in the manner of giving a lecture on Ibn Khaldun or the Muqaddimah. I would allow the words of the Muqaddimah to speak for itself. I would refer, of course, for the 1 year that we plan, we cannot read the whole Muqaddimah for 12 sessions. So I'll be looking into some of the major parts and skipping and going to the major parts. This book, Muqaddimah, has 6 chapters. So perhaps we'll for each section we'll go through 1 chapter, but it depends on how we go about it. In the first session, I explained about the background. The background here is to create to fill up the gap of introducing the Turath in the Malaysian campus, because when we talk about great works and we talk about Muslim thinkers, we have not considered introducing them as a course on their own. I would imagine this university, in fact, perhaps maybe in we should start first, having a course 3 credit hours on Ibn Khaldun, for example, or a course 2 or 3 credit hours structured in the curriculum on the Muqaddimah, a reading course. Because we're talking about the Islamization knowledge, we're talking about Tawhidic epistemology, we're talking about knowledge from Islamic perspective, but we have neglected these works. We have not really gone through literally engaging with these works and knowing what these thinkers talk about. So apart from Ibn Khaldun, we can have Al-Ghazali, we can have Al-Biruni, Ibn Rushd, and so on. Focusing and working on the original works and reading from the original works. And what I have in mind, a number which perhaps in between, but perhaps later after the series, apart from Ibn Khaldun, one that I want to introduce is Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni's Study of India, Al-Biruni's Indica, and the abridged version, or the Al-Biruni's book on India, where he studied the population of people of east of the river Indus. And Al-Biruni gives a different version or different manner in which social science, actually, or ethnography or anthropology is studied. So any anthropologist, any sociologist must read Al-Biruni's Indica to look at the methodology. Similarly with Ibn Khaldun, sociologists, historians, or any student of social human sciences must read the Muqaddimah to see how Ibn Khaldun classified, categorized, analyzed, observed empirically and spiritually and rationally, look into the emergence and the development and the evolution of societies. So again, also apart from Al-Biruni, we'll have Syed Balatas book on Islam and secularism. Also perhaps 1 or 2 other scholars. So these are master thinkers, these are master the ways in which we emulate and we learn from them without an intermediary. My point here is that, yeah, I'm playing the role of intermediary, but I don't want to be an intermediary. I want you to go straight to their works. I mean, there are abridged editions of Ibn Khaldun, A.J. Dawood, I think that's the book. But the famous translator is Franz Rosenthal. So I'm using the Rosenthal translation from Arabic to English. And in the Syed Naqib Al-Atas library, there are 3 sets of Muqaddimah published by the Norwegian Foundation based on Zurich. This is published in 1958. And there are about 230 books about Ibn Khaldun in the Al-Atas library, in English, French, German, and Arabic. So again, if you want to delve into Ibn Khaldun, you can go to the Al-Atas library. Of course, other libraries would have, but again, the Holdings library will be quite enough for you to know Ibn Khaldun. So what I'm going to do is to is to read again from the trusted translator, Franz Rosenthal, famous. You have to know Rosenthal. There are a number of great translators of Arabic works. People may say that they are Jewish and so on, but again, we're looking at from a scholarship perspective. And I've got several copies of A.J. Dawood's translation, knowing that I bought it, but I forgot that I bought it. So again, and I've got a photocopy of the 3 volumes at home, but I'm using in the library, so make it more genuine. I'm going to go through Ibn Khaldun's life as related by Rosenthal. And there are many biographies of Ibn Khaldun, including A.J. Dawood, including Lacoste, the history of the Third World, very French imperialist worldview, history of the Third World about Ibn Khaldun. One of the earliest books I read about Ibn Khaldun, actually, while I was doing my PhD. Which I included one part on Ibn Khaldun, to integrate Ibn Khaldun's corpus into the study of communication and the social sciences. Unfortunately, people read my book, which was only in 2005, but they have not noticed it. The only guys who notice it are the Koreans and the Iranians. So they have asked me to relate the book, the Iranians, last year and 2 years back. In fact, when I first published my book, Media History, 2005, a group of Iranian students, this 2005, from UPM approached me. They want to translate that chapter that I wrote about Ibn Khaldun into Farsi. So I gave them FOC, but I don't know what happened. So I don't know what happened to translation. And then recently, for the benefit of just to repeat, if you're not around, the International Communication Station approached me to write a chapter on the Ibn Khaldun as part of the Asian intervention in communication theory. So I wrote Ibn Khaldun in the context of a new science of society. And this is based on the new science that was mentioned in Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, as well as the new science of the new world, Novum Organum, new world, that was advanced by Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, 1450s or so, the culprit who developed what we're doing now in your thesis, in the format of your thesis. He's the culprit. The parts of a thesis, you must have literature review, you must have methodology, you must have finding. That is the Baconian template, actually. And then Gambetta Vico. Gambetta Vico is an Italian philosopher. Edward Said was very fascinated by Vico, and Vico was very fascinated by this discovery of the new world. So I'm relating the new world to the person of Ibn Khaldun and the Muqaddimah as an exposition of the new world, actually, the new world at that time, which was not espoused or not written by any other person, not even the Europeans. The Europeans were writing theology. St. Thomas and St. Augustine and various others in Italy, in Britain, Anglo-Saxon, they're writing about philosophy, but here this guy is writing about society. And writing about society in a manner which we can call, or rather we term it as modern. A modern scholar, a modern social scientist, a historian, a sociologist, a thinker. Again, I like to remind, not a description of a prototype thinker, as many Orientalists, many Eurocentric people have said. They would have said Ibn Khaldun is a prototype, is a proto-sociologist, which makes an Orientalist version of Ibn Khaldun, condescending him, putting him below the Western thinkers in the 1800s. He was already a modern thinker. He was modern before Europe became modern. So again, he's a modern scholar in a way which should be appreciated by historians, sociologists, anthropologists, and social scientists as a whole. So what is the life of Ibn Khaldun? How has he lived? in the first lecture, I turned to Prof. Aziz, his countryman. Ibn Khaldun is his countryman. Ibn Khaldun stretched from Maghribi to Egypt. That's North Africa, and Algeria is part of it. And Prof. Aziz is very, of course, your great friend. He's very close to Ibn Khaldun. I mean, intellectually. Prof. Aziz, in Algeria, there's a consciousness. Not only Algeria, but Tunisia, Morocco. There's a consciousness of Ibn Khaldun. Similarly, when in Iran or Turkey, when you mention Rumi, Jalal Rumi, everybody will be in awe. Also in the subcontinent. Yeah? So everybody knows they can recite Rumi's poems and so on. And also Ibn Khaldun. So again, I think we as students and as intellectuals who consume this kind of knowledge, I think we need to know the life of Ibn Khaldun. One of the things which I mentioned that day at the first lecture was that Ibn Khaldun was a maverick. He's sometimes here, sometimes there. He's adventurous. He was caught. He was arrested. He was almost killed. And he was a qadi. He was an administrator. He was a scholar. So you read the many biographies, you will get this image of Ibn Khaldun. So there are many biographies. I will share with you two. One is part of this book, part of the translator's work, and the other one I've written for Al Shajarah, I think 3-4 years ago. This is from Franz Rosenthal. This is a chapter which, I have to go through translator's introduction. And translator's introduction is he starts with Ibn Khaldun's life. That's the name of this introduction. He says, this is 1958. Okay? This is for almost 70 years, there are hundreds of books about Ibn Khaldun, but I'm being faithful to Rosenthal. Okay? Now, this is what he writes. Writing the biography of Ibn Khaldun would not seem to be a particularly difficult task, for he left posterity an autobiography which describes the events of his life in great detail and presents the historical background clearly. Where Ibn Khaldun is concerned, the events of his life is important. From the Muslim Spain to his genealogy in Yemen, and through the crisis that he faced in Spain and how he left. He migrated from Spain and he settled in North Africa. Again, the engagement in Spain, which I've not seen. Perhaps some of you can pick up from your thesis for your paper. That engagement of Ibn Khaldun with Muslim Spain. And again, another good topic, Ibn Khaldun's engagement across the Mediterranean, in other words, with Europe, which I see a number of commentators mention that he does not write about Europe, but he does. So again, the events of his life, very eventful. I'm comparing this to other scholars. Okay? Other scholars, other ancient scholars, they'll be part of society. They live in an intellectual and spiritual domain that where there's no question about Islam as a default religion and as a default deen. At that time, we're talking about before the 1500. We're talking about from the time of the Rasulullah to the 1500 to the advancement of colonialism. So what was the default? What was the worldview of at that time there was no sense of modernity. There was no vocabulary of colonialism. There was no vocabulary of being dominant. So can you imagine? And I want you to imagine, if we're talking about IOK, Islamization of knowledge. I mean, in Pakistan it'll be different. I don't know. It may not have the same sense. Or we're talking about this Islamization process. At that time, people don't talk about Islamization because everything goes back to God. The production of knowledge is based on the assumption of La ilaha illallah. And knowledge has its birth and has its decay. except for revealed knowledge. But human knowledge would have its lifespan, would have its shelf life. So, well, it's not, human knowledge is not sustainable. Real knowledge is sustainable. Human knowledge have its limited lifespan. It will be invalid after some time. It won't be permanent. That is what Nakib Balatas and many others have said, actually. Yeah? So again, but when we see Ibn Khaldun's life, and when we see the life of Al-Ghazali, the life of Al-Biruni, Ibn Sina, all those literally thousands of Muslim thinkers and scholars who existed between the 7th century, 8th century into the 15th century, there was no such thing as a default of the Western world. Theirs is the world. There was no domination. We must remember this. Knowledge was produced without any sense of domination. Here in the present world, in Malaysia or in other parts of the Muslim world, we are conscious of this domination of knowledge. That knowledge is dominated by another power, another hegemony. We call it hegemony. So when knowledge is produced by another hegemony and imposed upon us, that knowledge would be disturbed. Our reception will be disturbed. We will be confused in terms of why would that knowledge be imposed upon us, because whereas it is not compatible with our belief. These are the questions that we should ask. Okay? So at that time, there was no question about it. So again, Ibn Khaldun was writing within that domain. Had he written now, had Ibn Khaldun exist now, the Muqaddimah would have been different. The Muqaddimah would reflect a hegemony and a powerful domain dominating its worldview. So here you can see what do you call it? An authentic, I would say, an authentic manifestation of a scholar bringing up knowledge within the environment at that time. When I say environment here, I'm echoing Ibn Khaldun, because one of the first things that Ibn Khaldun mentioned in the environment is the geographical environment. Geography is important. It's geography that shapes the human condition, that shapes human behavior. So the geographical environment, the historical environment, the sociological environment, all these are the environment that nurtured the worldview of the person that we call Ibn Khaldun. So again, to understand Ibn Khaldun, we also need to look into, this is I think in chapter 4 or 5, Ibn Khaldun's discourse on the environment. We talk about the environment, and the environment now is becoming a very important topic to understand the world. The only thing is Muslims don't study. Muslims take the environment for granted. The guys who study the environment will be the sociologists and scientists in Europe and America. Okay? So again, the events of his life. He supports his statements with many documents quite literally. In fact, says Rosenthal, Ibn Khaldun's description of his own life is the most detailed autobiography in medieval Muslim literature. Forgive me if I use the word, or he used the word medieval Muslim literature, because Rosenthal was writing from the perspective of a dominant default culture in the image of the history of Europe. So he used the word medieval. It gives us an accurate knowledge of events in the author's life, such as is available before modern times, but for few historical personalities. Until recently, Ibn Khaldun's autobiography was known only in a recension that broke off at the end of the year 1394. Okay? But now its continuation has been discovered and is available in a carefully annotated edition. It brings the accounts down to the middle of the year 1405, less than a year before Ibn Khaldun's death. So in terms of looking at the biography, there are certain parts of the biography that we call a biography that was deemed to be unimportant. Okay? And that was the first part of of the Muqaddimah. That was the Muqaddimah, which means to say that was the autobiography of the Khaldun. In 1382, the 50-year-old scholar and statesman left his native Northwest Africa, never to return. For the period before this date, Ibn Khaldun's autobiographical statements can be supplemented by a perfunctory biographical note incorporated by his friend Ibn al-Khatib in his History of Granada. So again, he was not alone. Okay? He has friends and he has predecessors. He was influenced by a number of his earlier historians. Written in general terms of praise, it lacks any critical appreciation of its subject. There exists another biography of Ibn Khaldun, which a Western writer, Ismail bin Yusuf bin al-Ahmar, inserted in an anthology of contemporary poets entitled Nathir al-Juman. The writer, a member of the ruling family of Granada, died before about the same time as Ibn Khaldun. It can be assumed that he relied on Western authorities for the earlier period of Ibn Khaldun's life. He is referring to Ismail. Unfortunately, the text of this biography is not yet available, according to Rosenthal in 1948. Okay? Subsequently, I think if you read some later biographies over the last 10 years, you may find. Ibn Khaldun's own great work, the Muqaddimah, is another important source for his biography. So apart from the other earlier predecessors, his own work, is another source for his biography. Written in a much more personal style than most medieval works, the Muqaddimah sharply outlines his own personal philosophy and provides insights into the workings of his mind. This abundance of biographical source material has enabled modern scholars at various times to write Ibn Khaldun's life and to present the data in a factually correct form to which little can be added. These modern biographies vary greatly in length. Among the longest are Deslane's account in the introduction to his translation of the Muqaddimah. Deslane is a French scholar. I think one of the first to translate Ibn Khaldun into French. This was, this is what in the 1800s. And then I would read all. This part, page under Ibn Khaldun's life, Rosenthal relates the various biographical sources on Ibn Khaldun. Another difficulty, he says, that confronts Ibn Khaldun's biographer is not unconnected with this attitude. Patient scholarly research has succeeded in gaining a picture in broad outline of the environment in which Ibn Khaldun grew up, the environment in which he grew up and spent his life. Yet all our sources together do not yield enough detailed information to allow us to understand fully his position in it. For in spite of his importance, he was but a minor element in the overall picture. One of the works R. Brunswick, outstanding historical synthesis, is in French. La Barbarie, Oriental sous les Hafsidis, after the Hafsids, contributes greatly to our understanding of the historical factors of Ibn Khaldun's era. But through no unavoidable fault of his own, the work cannot yet answer all the questions modern students raise concerning Ibn Khaldun's development as a historical personality. Just as the autobiography does not disclose all the facets of his being, other medieval historians grossly neglected all other factors. They do not fully reveal the true character of certain events in which Ibn Khaldun was actively or passively involved. hardly ever do they give precise information about his contemporaries. The ruler's statements and scholars with whom he had to deal with are not described with sufficiently clarity for us to be able to assess the true meaning of the relationship to them. Okay? Now, I want to go through some of the his Ibn Khaldun's background according to Rosenthal. He wrote, or he writes, Ibn Khaldun belonged to a clan of South Arabian origin. Khaldun, from whom the family name was derived, is believed to have immigrated to Spain in the 8th century. So from Hadramaut, they immigrated to Spain in the early years of the Muslim conquest. He settled in Carmona, this Khaldun, his ancestor, a small city situated within the fateful triangle that Cordoba, Sevilla, and Granada form. If you've been to Granada, you see this geography called Seville or Sevilla. The Spanish call it Sevilla. Sevilla, very nice city. Granada and Cordoba, the Cordoba Mosque. And I think some 2 hours from there will be the Granada Palace. In that small area, much Spanish Muslim history of general European significance took place over the centuries. So in other words, his ancestors settled in that particular area and lived in that particular context of the Spanish Muslim territory or the Spanish Muslim domain. Khaldun's children, that is his descendants, left Carmona to settle in Sevilla. Rosenthal said, we do not know the exact date, but it is probable that the Khaldun family had already taken residence there in the 8th century. So in other words, according to his biography, I think they are, he stated what, 9 generations. But according to logic, between the 8th century until the 14th century, it would take more than 9 generations. But here it's important to remind you that the reading in this session is not to assess whether Ibn Khaldun is right or wrong. We're not saying that, oh, he's wrong, I know he's not correct. Based on today's measurement, for example, he says that a generation, an empire would last for 3 generations. That's what is in the Muqaddimah. Some people may say, no, it's wrong. The empire that I know lasted for 500 years. It's more than 3 generations. Assuming that 3 generations is about 30 years. So if 3 generations will be 100 years, one empire. Some have interpreted it as 200 years. So again, but here we are not going to debate whether Ibn Khaldun is right or wrong, but we're going to look into what he has said based on the circumstances of that day. But again, his view is dominated by the presence of revealed knowledge. Let me put it this way. His view and the views of others, the work of others, are based on the presence of revealed knowledge. In other words, revealed knowledge is taken to be true, correct, and valid. Our problem here now, in terms of the Islamization of knowledge and Tawhid, whatever, is a response toward the rejection of revealed knowledge, which happened in the 1500s. But he died before the 1500s. So the world was dominated by that spirit of the revealed knowledge. So there was no problem in his view when he says 3 generations, 4 generations. I think he would be based on that particular, being faithful to the spirituality and the cosmology and to the worldview of revealed knowledge. So according to Ibn Khaldun's own memory, only 10 generations of forebears separated him from the founder of his family. Okay? According to Rosenthal, according to his own memory, only I mentioned 9, sorry, I made a mistake, only 10. 10 generations of forebears separated him from the founder of his family. These are too few generations to span a period of 700 years. Okay? Later, I think in his in one of the later works, I think published in 2000 and maybe 2020 or 2019, the author counted the generations. These are too few generations to span a period of 700 years, even if one doubts the validity of Ibn Khaldun's theory that there are 3 generations to a century. So these are too few generations to span a period of 700 years, even if one doubts the validity of Ibn Khaldun's theory that there are 3 generations to a century. Ibn Khaldun's own genealogy was obviously defective. It is worthy of note that a descendant of the first Khaldun had in the 11th century reckoned about 9 generations from the founder down to his own time. All right, this is the part on the origin of Ibn Khaldun's descendants, ancestors. Sorry. All right, go to the next page. According to Rosenthal, when Ibn Khaldun's Arab descent has occasionally been questioned, because it says that he originated from South Arabian Peninsula and migrated to Spain. So over 10 generations or so, there would have been, a mixture of ethnicity. And this is important in terms of outlook. This is important in terms of how one views the world. The so-called present term, the cosmopolitanness of a person or a community, okay? And how a group of people who are isolated and who have not been interacting with others biologically, socially, would not develop that cosmopolitanism. So again, I'm interpreting Rosenthal. While Ibn Khaldun's Arab descent has occasionally been questioned, it has also been considered a major influence in forming his outlook on life and on history. Neither point of view has anything to recommend on it. So far, I've not seen this being picked up by writers about Ibn Khaldun, actually. So far, I may have missed it. Even the latest biography which I've read, I don't see this written. Ibn Khaldun's claim to Arab descent through the male line cannot reasonably be doubted. Though he may have had Berber and Spanish blood in his veins as well. Aziz is not here, so. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah. So again, I mean, the Berbers, they are indigenous to North Africa. In fact, Berber culture crossed the Straits of Trafalgar and manifested in the social life and architecture of Muslim Spain. When you go to the Maghreb, you find Berber culture. You can find Berber alphabet also. When I asked some people in Morocco, I asked, what's that alphabet? They refuse to talk about it. So again, Berber culture in Maghrebi, Tunisia, and Algeria. And to them, the Arabs are the colonizers. The Arabs colonized Berber culture, and the Arabs represent Berber culture. No. But I think there's also the link, the word barbarian. But Berber is another ethnic group indigenous to Saharan Africa. So he may have Berber and Spanish blood in his veins as well. Decisive in itself is the fact that he believed himself to be of Arab descent. So again, according to Rosenthal, very interesting, he may have Berber and Spanish blood, but he believed he is Arab. So again, this should tell us, I mean, we all in the social sciences that perhaps genetics and biological inheritance are not equivalent to social identity. And this is important for us in Malaysia, in the subcontinent, in the Arab world. For example, not all Arabs are Arabs. They bear Arab identity, but genetically, they may not be Arabs as such. Genetically, they may not be from the area in what we call Hadramaut, for example, who claim to be the pure Arabs. But they're Arabic speaking. They speak and they practice Arab culture. Example, one extreme example is Sudan. Sudan speaks Arabic, but they're not Arabs. Similarly, the North Africans, Tunisians and Algerians, the DNA would be different. The DNA would be perhaps akin to the Mediterranean countries. So also the Palestinians. Also Somalia, yeah, right, exactly. So also the Iraqis, where you find there'll be diversity of DNAs. So also people living in Iran, all of them speak Farsi, they practice Persian culture, but they may not be Parsi in their DNA. So also the subcontinent, different genetic sources.
Austria is German.
Yeah.
The language they are speaking, but they are not German.
Yeah.
In the US, full of different ethnicities.
Yeah. So their biological origins will be different. You go to the deep DNA haplogroup and your genetic composition. Many of us would have our genetic twins or clones other parts of the world, but we have our identity. So this is where I think we need to know. Okay? Similarly, when you talk about the Turkish world, from Anatolia, from Istanbul to Uyghur, they speak a common language actually, some variations, but DNA-wise, they're different. So again, this is again what I'm talking about. What I mean is that Ibn Khaldun portrays an Arab identity. He's basically Arab. He essentializes the Arab worldview and the Arab culture, but genetically he may not be all 100% Arab. So again, this is important, and not many writers touch about this. Decisive in itself is the fact that he believed himself to be of Arab descent. He believed himself. Belief. Much of our actions, we're talking about a scientific age, is based on belief. So this belief may relegate into a false theory, if we call it a false theory. Next week, there'll be a talk by Dato Bachelor on the origins of the Malays in the Gombak. And over the years, the non-Malays would accuse, although this bear evidence, various evidence, that they would accuse the Malays of believing in a false theory. So false theories are nothing new. Even during the time of modern Europe, we have false theories. Like maybe evolution, like the existence of man, the origin of man, for example. These are false theories. But anyway, he believed that himself to be Arab, a circumstance that in a sense conferred title of nobility. So again, putting himself on a certain status and having this difference, othering. In other words, I suppose Ibn Khaldun, I mean, he's not a perfect person. He's a man with flesh and blood. And he looks down on the Berbers. he doesn't put himself in equal term with the Berbers. That's one. He mistrusted, or he distrusts certain groups of people. For example, merchants and the nomads, the Bedouins. He mistrusts the Badawis. the Bedouins, but he studies them. He theorizes on them, but there is a much mistrust, not some, but much mistrust. So again, this, according to Rosenthal, yeah, it tells us about the self-awareness of Ibn Khaldun. However, even if Ibn Khaldun was proud of his ancient Arab lineage, there is no indication that it colored his historical views or influenced his reactions to his environment differently than his peers and contemporaries. This is very important. Okay? There is no indication, according to Rosenthal, that it colored his historical views or influenced his reaction on his environment. What does it mean? As a student of society, all of us are, including myself, there are at least two ways that we can study society. One, we study in an objective manner. We suspend our judgment. We portray neutrality, balance, objectivity. We are not part of what we study. Second, we become part of what we study. In other words, part of what we study means we are the object of study ourselves. We are both object and subject instead of only the subject. So again, this is important in terms of your studies here. You look at your research methodology, there is object and subject dichotomy, right? The object and subject dichotomy. What do you study? This is the object of study, for example. This is the object of study, right? This is the object. But what gives agency and what gives significance, what gives volition or life to the object? It is the subject. We are the subject because I drink the coffee. So I give my views, I give my position about the taste of the coffee. The coffee is the object. So is my position, my outlook on the coffee true or not? You know, isn't it? The subjectivity, objectivity, intersubjectivity, and so on. Again, some people may question, is there object-subject dichotomy from a Muslim perspective? You've taken research methodology. I don't know what you've learned. But is there object-subject dichotomy? Yeah, we study research methodology from in this university. We use certain textbooks, and in a good, written book on research methodology, there will be a part what we call object-subject. And it's always appended the word dichotomy, object-subject dichotomy. Right? That is from I won't call it Eurocentric, but that is the location of the philosophy of research as practiced in Western Europe, as practiced in the post-Enlightenment period, or rather as practiced during the the scientific revolution period, 1600. Object and subject. In other words, there must not be, that's formalism, that's positivism. There must not be any relation between object and subject, right? And this is the philosophy of research that has been employed in the social sciences, as well as, rather, I'll put it this way, employed in the sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, as well as in the social sciences. And to the scientists, they have to separate what they study from themselves, right? But if we were to look into the philosophy of physics, Werner Heisenberg, for example, Heisenberg was a physicist in the 30s. He says that even in quantum physics, one cannot detach oneself from the quantum phenomenon. So he goes back to Aristotle. knowledge is dependent on the mode of the knower. Okay? So to Heisenberg, since then Heisenberg has changed many times. I'm not a physicist. I don't know what the latest advances are in the variations of his theory. But from the 1920s and 30s, he said that quantum physics is dependent on the physicist and how the physicists would see phenomena at the quantum level. So again, coming back to this view, of okay, yeah, there is no indication that it colored his historical views or influenced his reactions to his environment. Very important statement by Rosenthal, and very important statement for anybody who wants to understand the Muqaddimah. But I think that in reading the Muqaddimah, one can take two views. One is that there is no indication that Ibn Khaldun's views or position influence his reaction to his environment. The other is the opposite. Okay? That there is indication that it colored his work. Why I'm saying this is because Rosenthal was writing, I mean, we are creatures of the zeitgeist of the times. He was writing in the 40s, 50s, perhaps the height of positivism. But in the 60s, 70s, 80s, knowledge began to take several turns that defies empiricism. And you can see this also in writing of Nakib Alatas. In one of his essays in the, I think, 1990s, Philosophy and the Linguistic Turn. And this linguistic turn is popular among social scientists in the 70s, 80s. One of which is as a result of the emergence of the epistemology, quote unquote, of postmodernism, where you take on a relative turn to everything. So what determines truth in postmodernism would be language, would be how we use language. This is one phase. But early on, in the era, in the 20s, 30s, based on the Vienna School of Philosophy, logical school of positivism, what determines truth is the material, okay? Not language. So again, you read Ibn Khaldun in that way. Okay, before let me do justice to Muqaddimah. Let me read. Right. This is the works of Ibn Khaldun. I've gone through it the first lecture, but I'm going to. Okay, this is the Muqaddimah, the starting of the book. The introduction and book one of the world history entitled Kitab al-Ibar of Ibn Khaldun. Muqaddimah means introduction. There may be two introductions here. And he starts with invocation. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, pray, O God, for our Lord Muhammad and his family and the men around him. And then he's forward. Give me some time. We'll end at 4:30. I do well. I give you about short time about we'll end about 4:30. Maybe about I stop at 4:15 or 4:20. Let me have some breakfast. The first word in the forward that Ibn Khaldun mentioned is the word history. It is in English. I'm reading you in English, not in Arabic. And this part of the forward was the first that I was exposed to, about maybe 40 years ago. But my foray engagement into Muqaddimah is a touch and go thing over the decades. I wasn't too serious actually. I've read parts of it, and I've used parts of it. So I'm just sharing with you some of the early parts. And then this happened to be the page 6 of this book. History is a discipline widely cultivated among nations and races. History is a discipline widely cultivated among nations and races. It is eagerly sought after. The men in the street, the ordinary people, aspire to know it. Kings and leaders vie for it. Both the learned and the ignorant are able to understand it. For on the surface, history is no more than information about political events, dynasties, and occurrences of the remote past, elegantly presented and spiced with proverbs. I like this thing, spiced with proverbs. Yeah, must be. He must be in. Maybe spices are. Yeah, spices are already there from the east. They have reached. They have reached the Mediterranean since Roman times. Maybe this is Rosenthal's translation. So he says, on the surface, no more than information about political events, dynasties, and occurrences of the remote past, elegantly presented and spiced with proverbs. It serves to entertain large, crowded gatherings and brings to us an understanding of human affairs. It shows how changing conditions affected human affairs. Now, this sentence, it serves to entertain large crowd gatherings and brings to us an understanding of human affairs. Think of the narrative. Think of the word narrative. I'm giving some interpretation, sorry. It shows how changing conditions affected human affairs. How certain dynasties come to occupy an ever wider space in the world, and how they settled the earth until they heard the call and the time was up. Here, think of the word change. Okay? These are constructs actually developed in the Muqaddimah, which we may not see in earlier works on society. The inner meaning of history, on the other hand, involves speculation and an attempt to get at the truth, subtle explanations of the causes and origins of existing things, and deep knowledge of the how and why of events. I repeat, the inner meaning. The previous one was the outer meaning. Then the inner meaning of history, on the other hand, involves speculation, and an attempt to get at the truth. Subtle explanation of the causes and origins of existing things, and deep knowledge of the how and why of events. History, within brackets, therefore, is firmly rooted in philosophy. Right? It deserves to be accounted a branch of philosophy. So this is the esoterics. The previous one was the exoteric. This is the esoteric view of history. And when we talk about the esoteric view of history, I'm not a historian. First, I have to qualify to you that I'm not trained from a history department. Okay? My formal foray into history was during my PhD, when I was taking my PhD in history and philosophy of science. So I came across these conjectures, poppers, so on. And when you talk about speculation, I don't know what Ibn Khaldun means actually, but I'm not thinking of speculation in the popular sense. No, because now over the last, I think in any society with the emergence of social media, history appears every day. Every day you find messages or texts about history or implying on history, implying on the past, and perhaps also implying on the future. Many ways can be analyzed from these texts in social media. Is it speculation in the popular sense? Is it analysis? Is it forecasting? The word? Navar. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So this is where we have to educate the popular level of history. The one of the important phrases that you use is discursive discourse, discursive narrative. That's important because history is not just the plain presentation of facts. It's discursive in nature. It brings about certain contradictory views, and it did not benigni say that these are facts. I mean, to me, history is based on what had happened, but we cannot, or rather, should not verbalize it as these are facts. Therefore, it is history. Facts can also be invented and reinvented and reproduced again. And how this came about was in the scientific revolution. That's when facts were reinvented or rejected. One of the rejection of facts is the rejection of revealed knowledge, the rejection of the nominal. What was rejected? Godhead, prophets, and the angels. To Muslims, these are facts. When I was, I hope nobody's listening by the way. When I was in the engineering university many years back before I joined, I was surrounded by engineers. I was in the humanities department, and these engineers will always argue in a linear fashion, evidence-based, linear, empirical. But then I told them, but then you pray, isn't it? I asked them, do you pray? They go to the mosque every day, they pray. Yeah, we pray. You believe in God? Can you see God? Can you see prophecy and the angels? You can't. What are you talking about in terms of empirical evidence? So there is a dissonance, actually. There is a contradiction with, people may get offended, but there's a contradiction in themselves, in what they do, and so there is a dichotomy. Again, this is, I think, important for Muslims to resolve, to see at a certain point when knowledge was, when revelation was rejected, and therefore how it can be reconciled. So, right, he says, discursive reasoning, right. The outstanding Muslim historian made exhaustive collections of historical events and wrote them down in book form. But then persons who had no right to occupy themselves with history introduced into these books untrue gossip, which they had thought up or freely invented, as well as false, discredited reports, which they had made up or embellished. That was written in the 1300s. Very relevant now. Every day people write history in the, when he said, introduce them into books, now we introduce them into this gadget or the telephone, and thought up or freely invented, as well as false, discredited reports which are made up or embellished many. Now, furthermore, they have used ChatGPT and artificial intelligence to manifest history. So again, we are facing a very dangerous world. Exactly. And what has been conjured, as is being conjured in through our handphone technology, are the many ways to the past. Many ways to the past. In other words, what has been conjured when we talk about history is not objective factuality. When we talk about the many ways, we're talking about what Chitik says, gods of the many. the gods of modernity. There are many gods to modernity, and this is what is we are facing now. When I receive something that implies on history and through Facebook, whatever, this is a new religion in the form of the past, and calling us to treat another road to the past. So which road do you want to take? I don't know. You have to go back to Khaldun. Many of their successors followed in their steps and passed that information on to us as they had heard it. Okay? Many of their successors, I mean, we take it as our time, followed in their steps and passed that information on to us as they had heard it. They did not look for or pay attention to it, the causes of events and conditions, nor did they eliminate or reject nonsensical stories. Exactly what's happening now. Okay? With AI and ChatGPT and with technology. Technology are us. It's the return, actually. It's the cycle. Yeah? Based on the Khaldunian line of argument, it's back to basics. You read Neil Postman, for example. You read a number of classical technologies, and they say that the present technology is a return to the earlier technology. Maybe I can give you another lecture on that. Okay, this is important. This paragraph before we end. Little effort is being made to get at the truth. The critical eye, as a rule, is not sharp. Whether the physical eye or the eye of the eye, whatever eye that we have, it's not sharp. Errors and unfounded assumptions are closely allied and familiar elements in historical information. Errors and unfounded assumptions are closely allied and familiar elements in historical information. Blind trust in tradition is an inherited trait in human beings. Blind trust in tradition until now. Okay? I'm not only talking about Muslims. I'm talking about the modern world. Talking about the West also. The catastrophe in Gaza is a result of blind trust of the West, their canon and so on. Occupation with the scholarly disciplines on the part of those who have no right is widespread. Occupation with the scholarly disciplines on the part of those who have no right is widespread. You can interpret it in whatever way you want. Okay? Non-historians talking about history. But not me, I'm not a historian, I have to qualify it. But the pasture of stupidity is unwholesome for mankind. No one can stand up against the authority of truth, and the evil of falsehood is to be fought with enlightening speculation, discursive reasoning, that's the word, yeah. The reporter merely dictates and passes on the material. The reporter is us. I mean, anybody who studies. I mean, it can be students, scholars, journalists, a layman, an observer, a reporter. It takes critical insight to sort out the hidden truth. It takes knowledge to lay truth bare and polish it so that critical insight may be applied to it. Okay, just a bit more. Many systematic historical works have been composed, and the history of nations and dynasties in the world has been compiled and written down, even at that time. Okay? But there are very few historians who have become so well known as to be recognized as authorities, and who have replaced the products of their predecessors by their own works. They can almost be counted on the fingers of the hand, and they are hardly more numerous than the vowels in grammatical construction. Here he cites Ibn Ishaq, the one who wrote about the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, and the translator, Jewish. Yeah, the first book, yeah. And he was a Jewish translator, Ibn Ishaq. He was not Muslim. Al-Tabari, Al-Kalbi, and so on. Al-Mas'udi, a major figure that Ibn Khaldun referred to. Um, okay. It is well known to competent persons and reliable experts that the works of Al-Masudi and Al-Waqidi are suspect and objectionable in certain respects. However, their works have been distinguished by universal acceptance of the information they contain and by adoption of their methods and their presentation of material. The discerning critic is his own judge, so as to which part of the material he finds spurious and which he gives credence to. Civilization in its different conditions contain different elements to which historical information may be related and with which reports and historical materials may be checked. So here when he's talking, again, he moves on to how we collaborate or corroborate information in history that ultimately forms the scaffolding for civilization. In other words, if we get our history wrong, okay, if our history, and by our here I mean, our own society, we get it distorted, we get the whole identity in error. So Ibn Khaldun along the way has mentioned also, sometimes we may live our whole life in error because of the distortion of information and because of that affects the whole civilization, the construction of civilization. So I will end here. Let me take a note. Page 8 of the forward. And in the Rosenthal's book, we have the forward, and on page for each page he has come up with I think this what do you call it, a heading. Page 7, the meaning of history, okay? The one I've read, and page 8 goes forward. Page 9 is shortcomings of early historians. Shortcomings of earlier historians. So yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Sure.
We will start.
Like in the beginning, this book was written, and I think in the middle of the 14th century.
Yeah.
After 7 centuries, things are quite different. And the way you have mentioned, if today Khaldun would be, so this book would be different. So can you enlighten us how different would be? Because at that time, he was writing about civilization, and as you had mentioned, he had mentioned the shortcomings of the previous story. So how will it be different today? Because after the 7th century, most of the things are changed.
Yeah, right, exactly. After between the 7th century, let me put it this way, in the known world, between 2nd century AD until the 15th century was dominated by the church. Those who are in Europe, who live in the heartland of Europe, who live in Western Europe, they would know that the church monopolized knowledge, the church monopolized history. The church was the dominant culture. The church was power. But the geography and the history of where Ibn Khaldun lived was not directly affected by the church. We talk about Muslim Spain, it was his ancestors, and Muslim Spain would be that area, territory, Cordova, Sevilla, and Granada. So he was mainly in North Africa, from Maghreb and Banu al-Salama, I think the place where he was writing, I think it was in Algeria, I think, and Tlemcen to Egypt. That was his known geography. So the known geography and the known history. So North Africa was not affected by the dominant worldview of the church. So between the 7th century and the 15th century, in fact, or even slightly later, there was no dominant power. There were many dynasties actually. He mentioned the Almohads, the Fatimids, the Hassanids, and also the Mamelukes in Egypt when he finished writing and he met Timur Lenk Tamulin. But and you see throughout the stretch, these are different dynasties having its own life and value, and there was no dominant. So again, Ibn Khaldun does not live in a dominant worldview. And fortunate for him also, it was not so much of the environment that created him, but he created the environment. And nobody dared to say this. If you read some of the biography, you find that because he was involved in the politics. You see, his father, grandfather, and his ancestors were people of the state. They were people who were engaged in the politics of the Berbers and the Bedouins. They were involved in the politics of North Africa. And so he was brought up in that environment. And that dominated him. But if we talk about a dominant ideology, he was not part of it. So, in other words, he was writing without a dominant worldview, without a dominant structure, without a dominant. The dominant value is Islam. It's basically intrinsic. Had he written it now or in the 16th, 17th century, I was assuming that he would be writing it in the context of colonialism. Therefore, he'd be living in a time when the Europeans dominated and colonized us. So that would usher a different perspective altogether. I mean, if we look at a subcontinent, for example, those who lived before the times of the British would have a different narrative compared to those who lived during the time of the British.
Sir, mine.
Yeah, Maududi, for example. Yeah, colonial mindset. Okay. Yeah, Maududi. I mean, 1940s, 50s. Maududi lived in the context of the crisis of the height of colonialism, and Maududi's response to an Islamic state is a colonized one. His response to Islamic state is the colonial state, the 1648 Westphalian model. Had he lived in Ibn Khaldun's time, he would not be responding to an Islamic state. Ibn Khaldun never mentioned the need for an Islamic state because these are states that existed.
End of golden age.
Yeah, you're a big Orientalist. Golden age and invention of Goldziher and the secular, some Jewish scholars. I think you read Bernard Lewis, you read Goldziher, and you find this category of the golden age of Islam. Suddenly, then the Muslims also subscribe to, that's our golden age. Therefore, we condition ourselves. And in ISTAC's narrative, in your thesis, and I've touched this, I've pointed out many times, don't mention the golden age, because you mention the golden age, I mean, you mention it in the proper context, yes. But don't mention the golden age in the context of doing a work from an Islamic perspective. I've just pointed out to one thesis here. I'm an internal examiner. I told the student to change the whole thing. Because the student writes from a subconscious worldview. Subconsciously, the student is an Orientalist. And the ISTAC student is an Orientalist looking at the world. Incidentally, he's writing about Ibn Khaldun. So I told him to revise the whole chapter. So again, this is what I mean. Had Ibn Khaldun exist in the 17th century India, he'd be like Maududi. So this part, on this background of Ibn Khaldun, this background of the politics of North Africa, would be one of the important structures, how we structure our response toward the Muqaddimah. In other words, earlier on, I was thinking of reading the Muqaddimah in isolation, by itself. But I thought, I'm not doing justice to you and the Muqaddimah. I think we have to go through the Muqaddimah in the context of the background, the scaffolding, the worldview of North Africa at that time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
I'm coming to you.
Another sector farming, the political environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights, Prof. And as question and answer session has already been opened by the brother, so now I would like to invite. Yes, Prof, please.
Merican Hocam, thank you very much. Since no one over here, we can freely talk, inshallah. No online. So I think there are two things Ibn Khaldun tried to inform us, starting from his old era. As you mentioned, the dynasties already collapsed down, the classical dynasties. So during this, start from 11, 12, the transition period. Over there, over here, some smaller kind of emirates, not sultanates, maybe emirates, muncul appeared, but later on they disturbed themselves through internal clashes. And Ibn Khaldun became a victim of this process. He tried to be victor, but he became a victim at the end of the day. As you mentioned, his grandfather was ruler, his father, scholarly administrators in Andalusia. He wanted to be one of them, even the sultan, in these 3, 4 smaller sultanates in North Africa during that time. Tunisia, Algeria, even Morocco, so complicated. What he did, academically or intellectually, nobody has told till today, I haven't heard or read, the isnad as a method in Islamic science is well established. But the isnad in the last 400 years, when we look at from the time of Ibn Khaldun, started to be criticized implicitly. And it became a sort of, let's say, a Western scholarship focused on the early Islamic historiography. They try to understand how this isnad as a method developed. So they tried to find out some weaknesses, and they found. Because of Muslim scholarly circles, we just, as you mentioned, golden age. In fact, there is no golden age. How we are weak today, how we are powerful today as human societies and individuals. In the past, the people like this. They were powerful, they had weaknesses. And the social reality is going around because of human fitra. So it's not, yes, as a method created and developed, but there were weaknesses. The hadith produced from nothing because of some benefits, some opportunities. Ibn Khaldun, because of this one, he observed, I think, because he was a scholar, and personal experiences among these clashes, among the dynasties, he found out something, a kind of a new narrative, as you mentioned, to understand the past. But what he proposes, it is not Islamic history. It is not prophetic history. I don't mean this is in the context of Western secular history, but something unique. Probably he was not aware of what he was doing. Again, it is a nice research activity. From whom he got these ideas? Okay, he got the Aslim himself in a corner of desert. He collected some books, but what books he collected and read in 4 or 5 years? So these are, I think, very important. I mean, methodologically, he invented something unique because of the transition period. Multiple problems occurred, like today. It was not golden age. And he tried to find out something, a new narrative throughout methodology. So this is a very interesting point, I think. I mean, how we understand Ibn Khaldun, Islamic scholar. He developed a discourse, Islamic historiography, or something different. Thank you.
A very important comment with regard to the self-consciousness of Ibn Khaldun. Again, he does not regard himself as an Islamic scholar. He does not assume to develop an Islamic methodology. So again, the onus is on us as the subject. We as a subject to delve into and to place ourselves in the framework of Ibn Khaldun. The problem here is the word Islam is in a way it's the definition. Okay? Islamic methodology, Islamic what is it? What is it actually? So and this has dragged this university over the last 40 years, not resolved yet. Islamic universities in Rawalpindi, in Uganda, so not resolved yet. Again, I'm asking this a wrong question, perhaps. My question may not be valid, that it is not resolved. That's why I was stressing this now. The moment in history in which revelation was rejected, that is the essence of understanding the whole complexity of Islamization or de-Westernization. The moment in history when revelation was rejected. That's it, up to that point. And beyond that, of course, this university has promoted Islamic Tawhidic epistemology. Again, if you look at Tawhidic epistemology, in the process of Islamization, you see what Prof. Osman means. He doesn't mention Islamization. Neither does he mention de-Westernization, which was mentioned by Alatas. But we have to look into the whole interactive or discursive reasoning of this galaxy of scholars. Prof. Osman, Syed Naqib Alatas, Syed Usir Alatas, Ismail Faruqi, and William Chittick, and Talal Asad. Okay? It's not just looking at that in a manual fashion. You have to look into that intricacies, and we have to posit that within a certain moment in modern history where this is concerned. We're talking about over the last 50, 60 years. Then only we can understand what it is. Because when we talk about Islamization, we talk about, for example, some people assume that, yeah, this is Islamization. The narrative may not be appropriate. In terms of, we talk about Islamization, are we talking about a monolithic, homogeneous kind of knowledge production system? Are we saying that ideally the whole world must follow, all universities in the world must follow this Ibn Khaldun or this perspective? I don't think that's correct. The assumption or the realization that we have to take is that these are complementary knowledge systems. In other words, if we assume that we want to develop an Islamic worldview on knowledge, then we also have to recognize a Christian worldview. Simple as that. We have to recognize an indigenous worldview. We have to recognize a Buddhist worldview. What do you call it? An alternative worldview. Eurocentric worldview. These are pluralistic. I'm not talking about pluralism, but again, these are pluralistic views of looking at knowledge. They complement one another. Problem with Muslims is that we thought that, yeah, this will be the dominant. We want Islamization, we want that perspective to be the dominant knowledge system. I don't think so. It's correct. Okay? Well, if Europe wants to adopt, fine. But we have to look into history over the last 50 years. You will see that those from the sciences, the social sciences, communication, sociology, they are all forwarding and advancing their own perspective and worldview of knowledge. From the Buddhist perspective, very strong in the 70s, 80s, and now. From the Japanese perspective, Hindu perspective, the Buddhist perspective normally comes from Sri Lanka. Hindu from India. Christian perspective, there are a number of journals that talks about the Christian perspective of social science. Again, Muslims must not isolate ourselves from these developments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Again, for the insights. I would like to mention one thing that in the beginning you mentioned that I don't want to be intermediate, so you should uh, go through Ibn Khaldun's work yourself. So I would like to say that if we'll go through the work, so we cannot have your worldview, your scientific, philosophical, and the social worldview, how you take the things. It's a very simple thing. You take from the book that he mentioned that he believes he is Arab, and how you relate it with the theory of identity. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for
As
Fazeel. And all you.
as we conclude, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Prof. Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican for sharing his insight with us today. May this session inspire us to continue exploring and applying the timeless wisdom of Ibn Khaldun in our own academic and intellectual journey. Now, we recite Surah Al-Asr and end the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There'll be 10 more sessions. A few more will be by me, and then I'm inviting Prof. Aziz to give 2 sessions, and Professor Zaid from History Department to give another 2 sessions. So there'll be 4 sessions out of 12 sessions. Perhaps in between, there'll be others who want to speak, no problem. Okay? Prof. Mehmet also, and a few others. So again, I'm just a midwife to start off and then to get people to read the context. If we were to read all, we cannot finish even after 10 years. So we're highlighting this, but let Ibn Khaldun speak for himself. That's important. Thank you.